6:30, I'd like to call this meeting of the Summit Hill School District Unit District Committee to order. If you'd all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we will do a roll call. Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mr. Faber?
Here.
Mrs. Miner?
Here.
Mr. Koch?
Here.
Mr. Marin is here, and we are joined up here by Mrs. Raines, our superintendent. I guess I should just call you and you're part of the committee the same as these guys. I always forget. We're right, we've thrown off my rhythm. So what we have for today is a focus on information and proposals. And we are going to hear from someone who has prepared a presentation at our request. As we discussed during the last meeting, we have somebody here from the Illinois State School Board. Michelle, oh, there you are. If you'd like to come up, introduce yourself and walk us through your presentation. I will let you know a couple of things. As we discussed during our last meeting, we are really on what I'm going to call a fact-finding mission here. And the presentation that you're going to see plays directly into that. So we're going to hear about the process and the procedures involved in a potential unification. We will not be getting input as to whether or not it's a good idea. First of all, because enough information does not exist yet, and second of all, that is not the role that the Illinois State School Board plays here. So they're going to be talking about the process and procedure that we should go through. Our questions will focus on the process and procedure. We will do public comments at the end of the meeting, as we always do, but if time allows, once we finish up the presentation, if there's any questions from the board, we may ping anybody in the audience to see if there's questions out there, just so we don't walk away and then have to follow questions. However, I know that Michelle was kind enough to include her contact information in the presentation that everyone should have a copy of. And you also have our contact information, so if there are questions you wanted to send to our board, you're more than welcome to do that also. So given that information, I will turn it over. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Michelle Henninger, and I am the main contact for school district reorganization issues at the State Board of Education. As mentioned, what tonight is with my presentation is just a walk through the option that has been talked about. We're going to talk about that, talk about its path, what it would have to do in order to become effective, as well as a few other issues within school district reorganization. Reorganization just overall is a voluntary action. The State Board and the state of Illinois does not mandate reorganization. We also do not mandate a specific type or specific districts that would have to go through some sort of school district reorganization. So this isn't really a sanction of the type of option you are looking at. I was just presented with, we are looking at joining Summit Hill with the portion that the high school portion that overlies them. So from that is how the presentation was built. So we aren't saying this is a good idea, we aren't saying this is a bad idea, we're neutral on it. So we're just here today to talk about process and facts. As it was presented to me as looking at the Summit Hill School District and the high school territory that overlies that, what that is a unit district formation. And a unit district can be formed from any compact and contiguous territory, no part of which is already included within any unit district. And so that compact and contiguous non-unit territory can be organized into a unit district. Now, we have had districts that have used this definition and this way of forming a unit district to go forward. It's just we haven't had anything on the scope and scale of what you're talking about here. The instances we've had is maybe a single elementary district and a single high school district, but their boundaries aren't 100% equal. Like, let's say the high school district is slightly larger than the elementary district. So they could still form that unit district based on the high school district territory, the elementary district territory, and taking a small sliver of territory away from another elementary district. It's the same concept, it's just yours because of the total amount of territory you're talking about. It's a much larger scope. So, to be honest, like I said, we can fit this into our process. There may be things as you continue, if you continue to go along, questions that because of the scope, we may not be able to answer 100% immediately. It may take investigation through legal avenues, just again, because of the scope that we are talking about. Okay. So, just some things on a unit district formation. One way to think about it is consolidation. Consolidation is a common term that most people know because we are taking pieces, individual pieces, joining it together to make a brand new district. So in that instance, it's very similar to two unit districts or two elementary districts going together. Consolidation is just our general umbrella term for when we're joining districts together, or in this case, pieces of districts, to create a brand new district. So, as I've said it many times, you're going to hear that a lot, new. We are creating a new district. The other identities would go away, and we are creating something brand new. We're going to have new tax rates that new district would be able to levy. We are going to have a new school board elected to serve that new district. And then even stuff as simple as a new name, a new identifier number, because we are creating something new. So, said it a lot, but it's one thing to just keep in your mind is you're not absorbing territory, you are creating a new district. Okay. Before we go too much into the process, I'm going to talk about a term called affected district, because that's going to come up a lot during the process. So an affected district is any school district where territory is included in any type of reorganization petition, where the territory in that petition is 25% or more of the land area of the district, or the area in the petition has 8%, more than 8% of the student enrollment, so more than 8% of the kids live in the territory included in the petition as compared to the total district, as well as that territory would encompass more than 8% of the total EAV, or equalized assessed valuation, of that district. And the reason we are mentioning this is because under the proposal that is being investigated, certain amount of territory would be taken away from the Lincoln High School District to be joined with Summit Hill Elementary to create the new unit district. And while we don't have total numbers, as a quick look, and these are ORs, you can see all the ORs. What that means is it doesn't have to hit all three of these criteria. If it hits at least one, that means that district becomes affected. And even just looking at assessed value, the assessed value of Summit Hill, which in effect would be the assessed value of the new district, which in effect would be the assessed value of the territory being taken away from Lincoln Way, as compared to total Lincoln Way, kicked up above 8%. It was around 23, 24%, and I think those are numbers that Mr. Cook has also publicized. So what that means is, as we go through, Lincoln Way would be an affected district. So as we go through, we'll talk about what that means, but just wanted to come up and talk about that affected district term, because in the option you are investigating, this does become an important item.
So just to be clear, the 25%, 8%, and 8% is of the current district. So in a situation where not what we're looking at now in the situation you described, where maybe you take a small
sliver,
sliver of
yes.
another district.
Yes.
If it didn't make up 25% of their land area, 8% of their EAB, they would not
They
be
were not,
affected.
yes. And thank you for bringing that up. In the situation, that's the other thing with the scope thing. In the situation I described that we had before, that used that unit district formation, where a piece was taken from another elementary district, it was so small. In an instance, there was like maybe not many kids on it. And we had one instance where it was just farmland. There were no children living on there. So it didn't kick in that elementary district to be a quote-unquote affected district. And again, there's some differences there. But again, what we're talking about is just, yes, we've had someone use unit district formation using pieces of other districts before, but not the scope. And sometimes once you get bigger scope, there's additional issues. And I've worked with this for 15 years, so we haven't had something of this scope in those 15 years. So some stuff might need additional investigation.
So as described now, Lincoln Way District 210 would be an affected district, and Summit Hill 161
Yes,
would be an
Summit Hill is an affected district, and that's kind of obvious because all of Summit Hill would be listed in this petition. And that's the way, I will be honest, most of our consolidations are using full districts. So it's obvious, yes, you're an affected district. We don't even have to investigate, we can move on. But in these cases, we do have to look at affected districts much more.
And just to clarify, Michelle, the feeder schools of Lincoln Way as well, they are not affected because they are the elementaries.
Correct. The feeder districts would not be affected, but, they would have a say as being like the parents and the taxpayers because they are a part of Lincoln Way. So we wouldn't think, give me another elementary district.
Looking 57C.
Okay, Mokina?
Yeah.
Okay. So wouldn't be Mokina affected. But the taxpayers that live in Mokina, because they are also taxpayers of Lincoln Way, they would be in the Lincoln Way block as affected in that way. But as an individual elementary district, no, they would not. And if this would go through, those elementary districts would stay, if you do only define based on Summit Hill without using any other elementary portion, those elementary districts, their legal entity would not change.
Okay.
All right, we are going to jump in process and actually up to the petition filing stage. And this is who can file for this type of reorganization. Who can file for a unit district formation? It can be filed by board resolutions from each affected district. So right on, we are jumping right into affected district. So that means that there would be board resolution from Summit Hill and Lincoln Way High School District. So because both of those would be affected. Or it can be filed by voter signatures when signed by at least 50 legal voters from each affected district. Now, one thing I'd say on filing by voter signature, 50 is the floor. I would almost consider 50 being the basement, because you would want to get more signatures than just your bare minimum 50. I mean, for one thing, let's say someone accidentally signed your petition twice. You're sitting outside of the grocery store, and someone's like, yeah, I'm a Summit Hill taxpayer, I'd love to sign your petition. And then the next week you go walk in the neighborhoods, and you end up at the same house as that person, and they've forgotten they've signed it. Maybe it's a different circulator. So you accidentally get that person signing twice. You may get somebody who signed who's not a legal resident voter. And so if all you have is 50 from each district, one gets knocked off, no longer a valid petition. So you want to get as many signatures as you can, one, to protect in case any signatures are challenged and thrown off, and two, just let's say the more signatures you have could present to those who are looking at it as more support. If you turn in, 50 from each, and it's like, yeah, because we stop there, you might think, oh, these are the only people out of this total population who cares for this to happen. Yes.
Can a resident of Summit Hill also sign as a resident of Lincoln Way for these two petitions?
Actually, it's going to be one petition.
Okay.
You're going to have one, we're going to talk about what's in the body of the petition. So you have one body of the petition that's backed by either board resolutions or voter signatures. So in fact, we've had places where your voter signatures have people from two different districts signing off on this. I don't know if we have any, because a Summit Hill resident is a Lincoln Way resident. I don't know if we have a ruling on does 50 count as 50 from each, but if you got 100, you could say, these are my 50 from 161, these are my 50 from 210, because they are both, even if it says 161. Anytime, we've had also situations where we had just recently a whole high school district and two whole elementary districts. Their signature sheets, they were 13, 14, 15. I have no idea which was which. And I think they had like, 13, 14, and 14, 15, 14 was our high school district. Yeah. So they signed in effect for both. But they had way more, they were three districts, they had way more than 150 signatures. So that's another thing. Then it doesn't even become a question. Or it's one or the other. You can't mix and match. You have to either have board resolutions from, in this case, both, because each affected district, we'd have two, or we have to have the voter signatures if you can't do that. So it's one or the other. We can't mix and match. And then just an FYI in the last, if we are being filed by voter signatures, those circulated sheets that are going to back up the body of the petition, those must comply with your requirements of your election code. And that's just such as, the person has to sign it, they have to put their address, the circulator has to witness all the signatures on their sheet. You can't just put it on a counter and walk away. It has to say, I witnessed everybody on here, and then that circulator has to have their signature notarized, because there's a circulator's sheet. It's very similar to any signature sheet you've seen for any petition of public policy question or any candidate type of circulated signature sheet. So that's one thing, it does have to comply with the election code. All right. These are the items that must be on the petition. There's a few of these that I would like to get into more in depth about. So when we go through this list, I'll say, hey, we've got a whole slide on this. So I'm not going to talk much about it until we get to that slide. So this is really just an overview. And this would be what I'm calling the body of the petition. The body of that single petition that's going to ask for a unit formation that's then going to be backed by either your board resolutions or your voter signatures. You have to have a request to submit the question, and the question is forming a new unit district at a regular scheduled election. Our regular scheduled elections, we always have one in spring. On even numbered years, we have our primary in March. Odd number years, you have your consolidated in April. And every other year, we have our November election, like we have one coming up now. So every other year, we have a November of even numbered election. So any of those times are times that a school district reorganization petition could be put on the ballot. Okay. We have to have a description of the territory. Because you're not having 100% full districts, you're going to have more of a description of territory. Usually it's, we're forming this X district based on District A and District B, and they just have to name them because you're taking the full district. So now that you're not taking all of a full district, you're going to have a little more of a description of that in order to, meet the requirements of the petition. And it's mainly to let people know that there is no question as to what is going into this unit district, what is being formed, and who is going to be joining together to make this new district. Okay. You're going to have to list the maximum tax rates that the new district will be eligible to levy. Oh, this is more details, so I have a complete slide on that. So we're not going to talk about this much till we get, a couple slides in. Division of assets and liabilities. So if this goes through, what our law says is if we're making a unit district that only contains part of some other district, then your regional office of education, your regional superintendent calls for an accounting based on another part of the law in order to divide assets and liabilities. But for the petition requirement, it does say you have to divide assets, you have to explain on division of assets and liabilities. So that would be something to basically kind of repeat the code back. If successful, regional superintendent will call for a division of assets and liabilities. But because it's applicable, dividing the assets and liabilities, you got to have it on the petition in order to basically tick the boxes to say, yep, they covered that, so we can, call it a valid petition as we just basically go through our checklist. Okay. Designate a body that's called the Committee of 10 of the petitioners. They're basically going to represent the petition, and we're going to talk about them in a little bit as well. You have the option to include a request to elect a new school board at the same election. And we'll talk about that later too. You may include permissive, it may include a request to issue bonds. It'll be a separate question at the same election. Very few districts do that. It's been years since we've had somebody who asked to issue bonds at the same time as their consolidation. So, probably, maybe, you might have to see. But it is an option. Okay. Our tax rates. Okay. These are the petition tax rates for any new district that is subject to PTEL. That is the Property Tax Extension Limitation Law. A lot of people commonly call this tax caps. Since Will County is under tax caps, they are under the PTEL. The districts right now, Lincoln Way and Summit Hill, are subject to these tax caps. So a brand new district would also be subject to the PTEL tax caps. So this is a requirement for any new district that would be under PTEL. And basically you gotta list everything. Kind of makes it easy or hard. I'm not sure which, but you don't have to pick and choose. You basically have to list all the rates, all the purposes with their reflective rate that the new district will have authority to levy. What that does is sets everything up at first as to what the new district has authority to go ahead and levy. You also have to specify your aggregate extension base. Right now, everybody's aggregate extension base is what your limiting rates apply to. But we can't have a limiting rate yet. That's after a district's been established. So that's why we have to have our tax rates, because that establishes it along with your aggregate extension base. Now, in addition, your petition may, so it's permissive, specify your debt service extension base. So you don't have to, but to be honest, this is one opinion I'm going to give. I said we don't do opinions. This is an opinion I'll give. You probably will want to specify a debt service extension base. What that does is provide for non-referendum debt that a district can issue. And we had a new district that was going under PTEL that chose not to establish their debt service. When they tried to issue non-referendum debt, their bond counsel went, nah, can't, because you don't have this. So what they had to do was go back to their public with another referendum to ask to establish a debt service base. So they fixed it, but had they already put that on their petition, it would have been right, and with their consolidation being approved, it was actually unit district formation, their unit district formation being approved, they would have already had that established. So that's the one opinion that I would say. It does say may. You really want to think about doing that, just because if you didn't, you would probably then have to go back to the public to ask again. And sometimes, someone be like, well, why didn't you do this before? You know, sometimes it's best not to have to go back so quickly for another question, because all of this, school district reorganization is a big upheaval. So if anything that can be set up for the new district at the one time and the one referendum vote, so it's all there out in the open, it's probably the best way to do it for these permissive items.
Would this debt service extension have to cover the debt that would be given to a district for the ROE division of assets and liabilities?
You know, to be honest, that's probably something that would have to be looked at.
Because if the ROE is making the determination of assets and liabilities after
Yeah.
the referendum, you would be obligated to service the debt given to you as part
Well,
of the
and that's
liability.
also debt that has already been established.
Right.
Where this is all, this debt service extension base is for issuing new debt.
Okay.
I think the district I was talking about probably had debt outstanding that had already been approved, maybe even at a referendum. It didn't affect that because that was already out there. And so that kind of continued on when they wanted to issue new non-referendum debt. That's when their bond counsel said, we can't help you issue anything because you have no authority to issue that non-referendum debt. So they could have gone to referendum. They could have then said, okay, I guess we'll ask for this bond issue. What they did was ask for an overall debt extension base so they could issue some non-referendum debt. So, but that probably would be something that would need some legal look at. But I am confident in saying for the most part, debt service extension basis in the petition is intended for new issuance, not bonds that have already been issued. Because your Summit Hill bonds and anything you had issued, those would continue on.
Right, you're going to get 100% of Summit Hill's debt and arguably some percentage of two towns debt.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That you are already paying anyway because you're paying to Lincoln Way, your proportion through your tax bill, you are paying a bond and interest rate. So.
Okay.
Committee of 10. Again, these are committee of 10 of the petitioners. They are going to represent the petition and represent all petitioners. Not as much an issue, I mean, they have to be on there, but when you think about board resolutions, well, that's, 2 or 3 school boards, depending on how many people are in the petition. When you're talking voter signatures, you're talking 50 from each, so you're talking 100. If you got 3 districts, you got to have at least 150. Sometimes you may have more. They're all the petitioners. All those folks are not going to be wanting to work on the petition. They're just like, yeah, I'll sign your petition, and I'll see you at the voting booth. So that's why we have a committee of 10 of the petitioners. They represent the petition. They represent the petitioners. They can be volunteers or appointments. Usually if we have a petition that is filed by voter signatures, that's kind of where it's more of a volunteer. Maybe the 10 people who are really excited about getting this together, they would maybe evolve into the committee of 10. If school boards are pursuing, then usually the school board would maybe nominate some people, a mixture maybe of the school board and general public who's not on the school board, to serve as this committee of 10. You must meet the qualification for a petitioner. Sorry, I'm reading here and I lost my place here. Sorry about that. You must meet your qualification for being a petitioner. So you must be a registered voter and must live in the territory being described in the petition. So just as an absurdity, someone who lives within one of the Joliet school districts, they are not in the territory being listed in the petition, they couldn't serve as a committee of 10. So they have to be within the area being described on the petition. General, they make the decisions on the petition. They complete the petition. So they're going to be coming up with the tax rates for the petition and all the other items on that petition. They officially file the petition. And they are going to represent the petition and the petitioners at the public hearing. So in effect, they are the proponents of the petition. All 10 of them must sign the petition in some way or another, either on those signature sheets, or we've also seen petitions where just have that not only list our 10 in the petition, but then say, okay, and here's all their signatures. So there's one page with all the committee of 10 signatures on there. So it just says, you know, they must sign the petition in order for the petition to be legal. 7 of 10 may amend the petition. So if you've got a petition ready and filed and then realize, ooh, we may need to do some amendment on it, maybe we need to tweak our tax rates, at least 7 of the 10 have to agree to amend that petition and file an amended petition. One of the other things that's not on here is that along with all the items that are on the petition, that's one thing, that's basically the main Committee of 10's main job. So they have to come up with all the items that are on the petition. Well, there are items that aren't on the petition, but maybe the public wants to know about. How is this going to affect our curriculum? How would it, you know, what are we looking at for this new unit district on curriculum? What are we looking at as extracurricular activities? How are we going to do transportation? Because before, in your case, Lincoln Way was doing transportation, Summit Hill was doing their transportation. How now this unit district is going to be responsible for K-12 transportation. How are we going to do that? So those are items that don't necessarily have to be on the petition. Actually, they aren't on the petition. But there are more than likely items that the general public, the parents, the taxpayers are going to want to know. It is actually, those kind of items would be the final decision of the new school board. But most of our Committee of 10s also evolve as a planning committee and make recommendations. This is how we see the curriculum to be. This is how we could see our bus routes being. So it's some more additional work that they can then show to, if it goes and gets effective, to that new school board, and then there's additional work that they can take and run with it. Since it's not a petition item, we say those decisions just have to be made by a majority of your Committee of 10, but any item have on the petition, such as how to do your new school board, what your tax rates are going to be, would need the 7 of 10 majority, because that is what it takes to actually amend the petition. So there's kind of a difference there. Your committee literally can only be 10 members. It must be committee of 10. But there's nothing preventing the formation of subcommittees, and the vast majority of committees of 10 do. They come up with subcommittees where maybe 1 or 2 official Committee of 10 members sit on, and then they draw additional public in and expertise. Say, finance. That is one of the big things with your tax rate. So there might be an actual finance subcommittee, maybe a curriculum subcommittee, a transportation subcommittee, and you can see that that expands the work for others to help, because that's a lot of work for just 10 people. And then you have your Committee of 10 serving on those subcommittees, and then they bring that work back in. Kind of think of it along the idea of like your board committees. You have board committees that do specific work and then bring information into the board as a whole. So you can kind of think of it on the same concept.
And then the Committee of 10 would actually, looking ahead, if the petition is approved, the Committee of 10 runs the district until the school board is elected?
No.
Okay.
Once the petition is actually through its phases, the Committee of 10's official work is done.
Okay.
A lot of times they might stay together to give informational to the public, but they're not going to actually run the district. We'll talk about how the board election as we get through. Yeah. Okay. And that's where we're at now. Okay, our election of our new school boards. Okay, new unit districts. How can new school boards be elected for a new unit district? The default is at large, just at large over the entire territory. Or our law does allow to be chosen to have 7 school board districts that are substantially equal in population. So it would take the territory of the new district and divide into 7 board districts. Like I said, they must be substantially equal in population. You're going to have a board member elected from each subgroup. So you kind of have multiple things here. If you choose at large, you might get everybody from one side of town. Who knows? Because it is at large. With 7 equal board districts, you do have equal distribution. That's how my district, Springfield, we elect our board members. We have seven sub-board districts. But I can only vote for my sub-district's representative, which means I only get to vote for mine and only every 4 years. I don't get to vote for any of the other 6 people. So it's one of those goods and bads. You can see, there's issues with one and there's issues with the other. That's why there's options, and for the committee that's putting it together to look at how would it be best for our district to elect this, knowing that there's no way that's 100% perfect that's going to appeal to 100% to everybody. But which of the options would be the best for us to choose? And we do only have these 2 options available in current law.
And Summit Hill and Lincoln Way, just for informational purposes, are both currently at large districts.
Okay, well there you go. And I'm not saying we should go there, but what I'm saying is that's also good information to know into, okay, our public is used to X. Are they going to be, is it going to be more acceptable for them to continue X? Or we have a lot of the people saying, yeah, I know we elect X, but there's issues with this, so do we want to go change them? Yeah. Now, as to when, your petition can call for your election of the new board at the same time as the unit district question. So, they're not going to be on the same ballot question. There's going to be a separate that has, however many people are running. But it could be at the same election. Or you can wait for the next election. If you don't ask to have your board elected at the same time as the new district question, what's going to happen is if that new district question, shall we form a unit district, if that is successful, then the election for the new school board will be called at the next regular scheduled election. Always keep in mind that your new district can't become a new district. You can't have an effective date for your district until you've elected your new school board. So you have to have your new school board elected and in place before the new district becomes a new district. Coming off of your question, there is provisions in the code that once the school board's elected, and then, your county clerk goes through the whole thing to finalize that election. At that point, that new school board may be seated in order to work on certain transitional items. We do have specific transitional items that that newly elected school board can work on, but very quickly after that new board election, relatively a month or so, that new board can be seated, working on issues for transition for that new board until the effective date when they become having all the authority and duties and responsibilities of any school board.
You didn't list it, but my assumption is that the petition must also include the effective date.
The effective date is defaulted to July 1 after your new school board's elected. Alternatively, if you want something a little later, so let's say, I'm going to throw out stuff. Let's say we had a new district that's being voted on in November of 18. They don't ask for their new board at that point. So come November 18, that passes. We're going to have a new district. They've asked, so their school board would be elected April of 19. Their default effective date would be July 1 of 19. Now, let's say they want that whole process, but they say, ooh, we could use one more year to get ourselves together. So you can then, in that case, put in the petition, if effective, okay, we're going to have, we're asking to have our new district voted on November 18th. If successful, we will have our board election April of 19, and we ask for an effective date, not of July 1 of 19, we ask an effective date of July 1, 2020. So, otherwise, if nothing is mentioned, July 1 of 19 would be the default effective date.
Okay.
So, and even if you want July 1 of 19, there's nothing wrong with putting it in, because we've had that, people just stating it, even though it's like, well, of course, because that's your default. So again, with that, when you elect your school board, when your effective date is, I feel we do have a lot of different options in order to fit with territories as to when do we need to do this, when do we need to be effective. Some districts, some areas would want everything all at one time so we can get started immediately. Others have said, let's take this one step at a time. Let's concentrate on new district, and then we'll concentrate on our board elections. So it does give options to fit more with what the committee believes fits with the territory.
Now, earlier you said that the ROE superintendent, the superintendent of the regional office, does the division of assets and liabilities. Is there a time period that they have to be allowed to do that? Written in the code anywhere?
I believe so. I have not used that provision much. That is something, the regional superintendent, as we're going to see in the next slide, is involved in the official process, from the petition filing. They have a lot of duties. So that's something that if, as you go forward, working with the regional office as to their timelines, and as well as deeper investigation into that portion of the law that does talk the assets and liability division. So this is after we have our petition. So we've got our petition ready to go. We've got, figured out how we're going to file it. We've got all sussed out about what our tax rates need to be, when and how we're going to elect our new school board, what we're going to, what elections we're aiming for. Now we're actually in the process, moving it towards an election vote. So it is filed with your regional superintendent. So this would be filed with your regional superintendent of Will County. That office is going to hold a local public hearing. So they are going to publish notice for that hearing and then be the hearing officer at that public hearing. Now, the petitioners are to pay the cost of publishing the notice as well as a transcript taken at the public hearing. Now, they don't have to do the legwork. The regional soup is going to do the legwork of arranging for the court reporter and the transcript, arranging for the notifications. But since it's the petitioners who pay that cost, and in effect covered, borne by usually the committee of 10 on behalf of the petitioners, they are going to probably ask for a deposit at the time of filing, so that they have the funds in order to cover this. If it comes in less, they will refund. If for some reason they think, oh, we're going to have a one-night hearing, so I'm going to ask for our court reporter for one night, and there's a lot of testimony that they feel they have to adjourn and reconvene the hearing maybe the next night, then it's probably going to add some costs, and if it wasn't covered originally by the deposit, they would then bill the committee that they need more funds for that. But yes, they will ask for a deposit at the time of filing. This is something that each region would come up with because they know the cost in their region for notification, cost to get a court reporter. So the best thing on that is if this goes forward, the committee's getting it together and ready to work on it. Before you're ready to file, just pick up that phone, call the regional soup and say, we anticipate filing around this time. What would our deposit be? And then that can tell you, oh, you're going to have to pay us X. And that way you're prepared for when you do walk in. Okay, at the public hearing is the time where the committee is going to highlight their petition. because they are representing that petition. So they're going to highlight how they see that new district. They're going to testify of the elements on the petition, as well as any additional things they've come up with as like a planning committee. It's also a time for anybody else in that area that they can testify either for the petition or against the petition. So that could be any of the, any affected district. That could be any of the public within that area that is being defined in the petition. So this public hearing is basically an open time period that anybody could come in, I say anybody, but really anybody affected by the petition could come in for official testimony, written or verbal, to put their views for or against the petition in the public record. Once the hearing's done, the ROE is going to assess everything that happened at that hearing. They're going to look at the evidence, they're going to read the transcript and all that verbal testimony, as well as they were right there. They're going to make a approve or deny the petition. And it's much of a recommendation, because no matter what the regional superintendent says, if they approve the petition or deny the petition, it comes to the state board. So they submit the petition, transcript, all the hearing, all the evidence to our state superintendent. Our state superintendent, through staff members, will review the entire record and the petition. So we review the petition. We don't hold a new hearing. We just review the record of the hearing. And then myself, along with my boss and some other folks, we make a recommendation for our state superintendent on either approving or denying the petition. And one thing, when we look at things, all we can legally look at is what happened at the hearing. We can look at the petition itself, the transcript, and the evidence provided at the hearing. We've had instances where post-hearing, someone's wanted to come in and talk to us or come in and send us stuff, what they feel about this petition, and we can't accept that. We can't look at that for our record. So all we can look at is the petition record. So if anybody wants the state superintendent to know something, it has to be put in the record for that, at that hearing for that petition. So again, state superintendent makes an official decision approving or denying the petition. His decision is considered an administrative decision. So there's a time period where, again, anybody who has standing, either gave testimony at the hearing, one of the affected districts, could challenge the state superintendent's decision in circuit court. So that would come back to circuit court in the county where it was filed, so it was Will County. So in effect, it's a court case to challenge the state superintendent's decision. If the state superintendent approves a petition and there is no administrative review, there's a time period. It's 35 days from receipt of the state superintendent's decision. So it's not a open-ended. Like any court cases, you have a certain time period to hit if anybody wants to file. But if our state superintendent approves a petition and there is no administrative review, then it goes to referendum vote. So what started locally through a local petition goes through a hearing at the regional level, a decision at the state level, but if approved and no administrative review, comes back to the local community for the referendum vote. And it must pass by a majority of those voting in each affected district. So we come back to our affected district definition. So based on current information, we all know if this is the scenario that goes forward, that Summit Hill is an affected district. So it has to pass by a majority of those voting in Summit Hill. And since, based on what we know, based on current information on the scenario presented, that the Lincoln Way High School would be an affected district, it would also have to pass by a majority of those voting in Lincoln Way High School as a whole. that's where that affected district definition and why that becomes important. No, not only as into who needs to be on the petition, but then who has the opportunity to vote on that. And when they establish that 25, 8, or 8, what that basically means is enough territory is taken away from a district that all the districts should be able to vote on if this happens. Where like in that other scenario we talked about where it was just a tiny little sliver, because it was so small, it deemed that it didn't meet those requirements, so that whole elementary district did not get to vote on it. So there's our difference there. If you're taking enough territory away, our law says the entire district of where you're taking territory away should have the opportunity to vote on that change to their district.
So I have two quick questions. If the state superintendent denies the petition, it dies except if an administrative review reinstates it?
Yes, in effect, yes. If the state superintendent denies the petition, says by our standards and for these reasons we don't think it should go to referendum vote, then again it would be up to, I guess you would say, the aggrieved parties, anybody, committee of 10, either the affected district, someone who has testified at the hearing in effect as standing, could challenge that under administrative review. And yes, the administrative review, in effect, if it's court case, they could say, yes, we're in effect affirming the state superintendent's decision, or we are reversing it. No, we don't think that the state superintendent made the right decision, so we are going to reverse it.
And then when you talk about those criteria, what is the state superintendent judging a petition against?
In general, first we have to look to make sure it's a legal petition.
Right.
So we're going to look at all of those elements that have to be in the petition. Did it meet all of those elements? Then we are looking at items such as, is it in the best interest of the students in the area and area adjacent? So it wouldn't just be in the territory. Is this in the best interest of the students and the taxpayers in the area being talked about in the petition, but also overall generally, especially since, in this case, since we're pulling some territory. We would look at the tax rates. Is that going to allow the district to survive? Even though we don't have definite assets and liabilities, there is discussion about using funds and assets in general for, again, all the districts. So we do have, and those are the same criteria that the regional office has when they look at a petition. Best interest, and one of the main things is best interest of the kids.
So you're going to hear my bias here, so I'm not going to attempt to hide it. If a group of people get a petition together and work in the area and get as many signatures as they want from the people in that area, 3 people at the state level who don't ultimately live in that area, who don't have kids in the area, and don't pay the taxes in that area, will then decide what is best for them.
Well, that we have a step in there to either send it to referendum vote, or, and I can't speak specifically, mainly because we look at each situation.
But you could stop it with 3 people who aren't impacted by this, simply because they don't like it or some criteria they don't think it's good for the kids.
We have our criteria to look at, and we would look at the specific situation as presented, and there, I can't say one way or the other because we have to look at each.
But those criteria are not in code.
They are, but a lot of it is general statements. So I mean, it's that criteria we look at.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we are putting that out of the law. The law says that the regional superintendent takes into consideration, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not really a checklist. They are general statements, but it is nothing that we invent that we're saying, oh, we think it needs to be in the best interest of the kid. That's actually in the law, as saying that the state superintendent will take into consideration these items and make a decision approving or denying the petition.
So would they deny it with cause or just a flat denial and you don't know why?
I'm assuming we would put in our administrative decision that, you know, if it is a denial, why, the reasons why.
Well, if it's subject to court review, they have to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah. So yes, I mean, it's not just, hey, we denied it. I mean, we would have to put in our reasoning in that administrative decision to, in effect, back up what our state superintendent is doing. Yes, and both ways. And when we approve something, we don't just send out and say, hey, we approved it. Our administrative decision comes up with, these are the finding of facts, these are our conclusions. So in there is also reasoning on us saying we are approving the petition. Okay. As we talked, your petition is being submitted at a regular scheduled election. This is our first, we kind of do a 2-year cycle, I guess you would say. The petition must, in order to meet all timelines, the petition must be filed with the ROE approximately 6 months prior to the election date. Now, it can be filed more than 6 months,